Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am going to be doing my January wrap-up. Feels weird sitting down and doing a wrap-up because I didn't do one last month. I did a full wrap-up ranking of every book that I read in 2024, so I didn't do an actual December wrap-up. So we are here now to do my January wrap-up, and it has been a great start to the reading year. I will say I have 2 new releases. I finished a series. Actually, I finished 2 series, and I even found a 5-star. So, very good reading month. I read 9 books in total. I haven't done the math yet, but I will put up the page count and average rating for the month as well if you are interested in seeing those stats. But without further ado, let's jump into the 9 books that I read in January. So the first book that I read was Imagine Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is technically the last book in the Shatter Me series. There is a novella after this, but this is like the last full-length book. And I'm gonna be honest, I did not love the ending of this series. I loved the first 3 books of this series, like the first 3 main books, and then I feel like we started to lose the plot and I just like wasn't into what was happening. I almost felt like it should have ended at a trilogy and we could have wrapped things up there, but instead it just kept going on and the ending felt so rushed and we were left with a lot of like unanswered questions, and then they just jumped into the epilogue and I was like, what is going on? So I ended up only giving this 2.5 stars. I'm happy that I read the series. I enjoyed the series as a whole, but like I said, I think the second half of the series, I didn't enjoy nearly as much as I enjoyed the first 3 books. Then I read the final novella, Believe Me, which is basically just an epilogue. You get the first 2 chapters of Believe Me at the end of Imagine Me. It's like the epilogue, and then it just continues on here. And honestly, I feel like it wasn't really necessary. I was really hoping that this was going to answer a lot more questions, and it did answer some. I will say, like, some of those unanswered questions at the end of Imagine Me, we did get answered in this book. But there's this whole section that happens at the end of Imagine Me that they just completely skip over, and it's never explained like exactly what happened. You get little snippets of they'll be like, oh, we did this, or oh, that happened, but like you never get the full explanation, and I kind of wish that we would have gotten that, and that's what I was hoping this was going to be. So I gave this one 3 stars. Again, enjoyed the whole series, but the end was not my favorite. Then if you saw my reading vlog, reading the best books of Goodreads, you'll kind of know my thoughts and opinions on these next few books, but I'll give another little general synopsis again. So first up, I read The Ministry of Time, and I heard such good things about this book last year. So many people were raving about it, and I'm not usually into sci-fi, but I wanted to read it, and I did the video reading the best of Goodreads, so I was like, you know what, let me just try it. And I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I really enjoyed the concept of the story. Basically, you have the government in the UK brings 5 people back into present day that died in the past, and they each get a bridge, which is basically a person from present day who's supposed to help them assimilate into culture. So you have our main character, and she is the bridge for a man that died in, I want to say like the mid 1800s. He was like an explorer, and she is his bridge. And there's some really like funny, lighthearted, very charming parts of him like coming into the 21st century, understanding the culture. Like obviously so much has changed. He's never seen like any technology or things like that. So I really enjoyed that part. There were definitely parts that like made me laugh out loud, but the ending really confused me. The last like 50 to 60 pages, you start to get more of this mystery of like why the government is doing this and are there secrets that they're hiding and all this stuff. And I feel like it did not make sense. Like I was so lost, and I even looked up reviews afterwards to be like, am I just not understanding, or is everybody confused? And it's kind of a general consensus that everyone is a little bit confused. It's meant to be like open interpretation, which I personally don't love when books have an open interpretation at the end. I feel like if there's a little bit, it's fine, but this was truly like, what just happened in the last 50 pages. So I didn't enjoy that part. I didn't love the writing style very much either. Except I really enjoyed, and I found parts of it to be very enjoyable, but then there were a lot of parts where I just found myself like zoning out and not really feeling like I was wanting to read it or being entertained. Then I read The Wedding People, and I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. So this is about Phoebe, and she goes to a hotel with these plans, and when she shows up, she finds out there's a wedding going on at this hotel, and the bride and her kind of strike up this unlikely friendship, and it throws her plans off, and now she's spending the week with the bride and all of the wedding guests, and it's really entertaining. I feel like it's not super heavily plot driven. It's more just like learning about these people's lives. You get a lot of flashbacks to Phoebe. The reason she came to this hotel is she is like completely at rock bottom. So you get a lot of flashbacks to her life and what brought her to this state. And then you also get a lot of learning about the bride and her family and their familial drama and everything that's going on. And I just found it really entertaining. Like when I wasn't reading, I wanted to be back in here reading this. Also, it's very deep and emotional. Definitely check trigger warnings if you're gonna read this one. There's so many deep and emotional conversations in this book that I really enjoyed. Like Phoebe is literally like everyone's therapist basically, and I actually really enjoyed that part. I said this in my vlog, but I was like, this book felt like a therapy session, and it 100% did. I really enjoyed this. I think the reason I didn't rate it higher than 4 stars, which 4 stars is still really good, is I feel like the ending was quite predictable, which again, it's not a super heavily plot driven book, so I feel like it's not awful that the ending was predictable. I don't know, there were just some parts where I feel like I wasn't as invested, but I still really enjoyed this book. I loved the characters, and I highly recommend reading this one if you wanted to read it. Again, a super hyped up book from last year that I was very excited to read. Then the next book I actually listened to on audiobook, and that is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. And I was very excited because I haven't read a mystery thriller in a while, and so I was very excited to get into this one. I really loved listening to this on audiobook. I really enjoyed the narrator. It was also a very long book, and I feel like if I was actually reading it, I would find myself getting bored very easily, but listening to the audiobook definitely helped me to get through it. I give this one 3.5 stars. It's advertised as a mystery thriller, and you definitely have that mystery element, but I feel like it leaned more towards a literary fiction, and then you just have like a mystery going on, because basically this is about Barbara. She goes missing from summer camp, and the summer camp's on her family's property, and her older brother went missing in the same way like 10 or 12 years prior. So now everyone's trying to figure out if they're connected, what happened. They never found her brother, and so you're trying to kind of put the pieces together. But you get so many different people's point of views. You get her parents' past and their point of view, you get her camp counselor, you get her brother, you get all these other people that are all involved, and you're kind of trying to piece it together. But I feel like a lot of it was just learning about the past of the camp and the familial relationships and not leaning as much on the mystery aspect. And I feel like there was a lot of details thrown in that were not necessary to the mystery. I feel like for most mystery thrillers, you don't really get a lot of backstory on the characters because it's not necessary to the actual mystery, and you're more just learning about what happened and things like that. But with this one, you got so much backstory on the characters, which is why I feel like it leaned more towards a literary fiction as opposed to just a mystery. So I still enjoyed it, but there were definitely some times where I found myself getting bored, and I feel like we kind of went too much into detail on certain things that didn't need to go into detail. Then we found my first 5-star of the year, The Women by Kristen Hanna. I cannot say enough good things about this book. I swear this book changed me, which I know is dramatic to say, but it truly did. This book, I have never cried as hard as I have to a book than I did this one. Like, I truly can't think of a book, actually maybe Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but like other than that, this book has made me sob so hard. In like throughout the whole book, like it wasn't just the end, it was literally little bits all along the way where I was like inconsolable. If you watch the reading vlog, you know I literally was like unable to contain myself. This book is about Frankie, and she goes to be a nurse in the Vietnam War, and so you get that experience of her being a nurse and all of that and the struggles, and she feels like she jumped in head first and didn't know what she was really getting herself into. Then she comes back, and instead of this praise that she expected that she would get from being in the war, people were very against it. If you know anything about the Vietnam War and the United States involvement, people were protesting the war. They did not want the US to be involved. So when she came back, people were very cruel to her, and she had a very hard time assimilating back into culture and everything. And you just follow along her story, and it is so beautiful. I loved her female friendships in this book, her friendships with two nurses that she met in Vietnam and then continued on friendships with, and how they just leaned on each other, especially because they were some of the only people that really truly understood what each other were going through, especially when they weren't really getting any help from other like veterans affairs and things like that. It was just such a moving, emotional book. Kristin Hannah just writes in a way that tugs at your heartstrings. She makes you fall in love with these characters without even realizing that you are falling in love with them. And yeah, this book, 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Definitely recommend this book. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be reading more Kristin Hannah this year. I've only read 2 of her books so far, but I've rated them both 5 stars, and I feel like she is very quickly becoming a new favorite author of mine. Then, of course, I read Onyx Storm. It came out this month. I really enjoyed this. I feel like the general consensus from everyone was that we were very confused at the beginning. The first 150 pages, I was like, I don't understand what's going on. I'm so lost. But then things started to finally click in place. I loved the different like journeys that they had to go on. This book was basically just full of side quests. I feel like just when they thought they had one thing figured out and they were good to go, it was like, actually you need to go do this other quest in order to get this thing that you're trying to get. And so much traveling and back and forth, and I really enjoyed being back in this world. I gave this one 4 stars. The ending had me so confused, and I saw Larry Reed's theory, and I'm like, yeah, I'm convinced that she is correct. So I cannot wait for the next book. I really hope that Rebecca Yarros does not make us wait another year, but I feel like she's probably going to. Then another new release from this month was Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. This is part of the When in Rome series. So When in Rome is about the brother, and then Practice Makes Perfect is about one of his sisters. Beg, Borrow, or Steal is about his other sister, Emily, and her and Jack are kind of like enemies, sort of. I feel like you don't really have an enemy in the real world, but they just like dislike each other, and they're always kind of running into each other and sort of competing for the same roles. They've known each other since college. They're now teaching at the same school. Jack leaves. She thinks he's gone. He goes to get married, but then he comes back and he's like, actually, I didn't get married and I'm back to working at this school. And he also moves in next door to her. So now she's like, great, I can't get rid of him. She ends up accidentally sending the book that she's writing to the principal of the school. And so she goes to Jack and she's like, I need your help to get this back. Like, he cannot read this, like he's gonna fire me, all of this. So the two of them sort of go on this little mission, and of course feelings spark along the way, and they realize that they don't actually hate each other, and it's just very sweet. I really enjoyed it. If you're looking for like a light, easy rom-com, I feel like you would really enjoy this. Also, Emily is oldest daughter, so, and she very much gives oldest daughter vibes of like always putting everyone's feelings before her, always taking care of her siblings, and never letting her true emotions come out. And I feel like Jack really helps her and also himself along the way to open up to their emotions and learn that it's okay to be vulnerable with each other, and it's okay to be vulnerable with their family and everything. And I just thought it was very cute, very light, easy romance. I had a lot of fun reading this one, and I gave this one 4 stars. And then the last book that I read this month was Tale of the Heart Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. This is the last book in the Artifacts of Uranus series. It actually came out in November, and I was hoping to read it then, never got around to it. Finally, I was like, I need to know how this series ends, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like this was such a good ending to this series. Similar to Onyx Storm, I feel like this was just a book of like side quests. Like, just when they thought that they could get one thing, they were like, well, actually you have to go through this in order to get this artifact or thing that you're trying to get. And so many different quests that they went on, and the end had me stressed. If you have read this book, you know, like I knew, because I was like, it's the last book, it all has to turn out okay, but I was like stressed. I was like, what is going to happen? And I actually really enjoyed this. The end of the book actually had me tearing up. I was not expecting at all. I am just going to really miss these characters and miss this series. I have really thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like it definitely deserves more hype. I don't see enough people talking about it. So please, if you haven't, read the Artifacts of Varana series, because it is so good. And I gave this last book 4.5 stars, but I think overall the series is probably, I want to say it's like a 5-star series, even though I didn't rate any of the books 5 stars, but overall the series as a whole, I'm just like obsessed with. That is all for my January wrap up. Like I said, great start to the year, great reading month. Let me know down below what books you read this month, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.